Hello everybody, my name's Alex Vidal, president of RelatedISG International Realty and host of the show you're watching today, episode 107 of the Closer Club. I think it's the first one we've done in person, socially distanced apart, since episode 96, to give you an idea. So it's been a while since we've done these in person and a little rusty getting set up. Dude, who are you? Let them know who they are. They should know who you are.
Hi everybody, I'm Craig Studnicky. I'm the CEO of ISG and nice to be on episode 107. I'd like to remind everybody, I was episode number 1.
Episode 1, I think he's been a guest at least 3 times.
Yeah, a few other times.
This may be episode, actually I know for a fact it's 3 times. 4th time, repeat customer. And today we're going to talk about a very special webinar that ISG World put on 2 weeks ago, actually. And Craig, before we get into the questions, this is going to be an interesting one. We're going to kind of go back and forth between clips from that webinar to questions that we have, and we're going to break it down. Share with the audience, Craig, a little bit about who was the webinar with, and what it was about.
Well, it was with Andres Oppenheimer. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning author of economics and political changes throughout South America. He has a program on CNN called Oppenheimer Presenta that he's won 2 Emmys for. He is regarded as one of the leading experts on political and economic changes in South America. Earlier this year, I asked Swire Properties, the developers of Brickell City Center, if they would host him, because I constantly get asked questions from brokers throughout, from whether it's Mexico or Colombia, Argentina, Brazil, wherever, about how and why and when they would see an influx of South Americans again into the Miami market. If there's anybody that had any insight into that, it was Andres.
Got it.
And why? Because the dollar's been high. And since 2016, the dollar got very expensive around the world.
Oh, save that thought. We're going to talk
about it.
Well,
I will, but it did slow down demand a little. So South American brokers were asking, when are we going to see it again? Andres in January and February had lots of reasons to believe this was going to be the year, still does, for South Americans to return to Miami in fairly substantial numbers. So that was and that's because of the social and political stuff that we will get into in this interview. And so we were prepared to do it. I think it was the first week of March. We were going to go to the Mandarin Oriental. We had 450 RSVPs. He was going to be live in person and do his, Oppenheimer Presenta thing. But then something happened.
Yeah.
Called the pandemic.
Little thing called the pandemic.
And so we had to reschedule. But the response from the webinar from a couple of weeks ago has been really wonderful.
Well, I think we need to get right in it. What we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth between what we feel were the 3 most important clips from the interview, from the webinar. We're going to talk about the current state of affairs, the expert projections, the economic expert projections on the recovery, as well as the IMF projections for the country on economic contractions and globally as well for 2020 and 2021. And we'll get into what IMF means, because I actually didn't know until 2 minutes ago. So let's go right into it. Here's clip number 1 on the current state of affairs, and we'll be right back.
Let me share with you a couple of things about what I think will happen in the region economically and politically over the next 2-3 years. Economically, the bad news is that this year will be, as you all know, a terrible year, awful year, the worst recession since the Great Depression of 1929. The good news is that the recovery will come relatively faster than in the Great Depression of 1929 or in the financial recession of 2009. The Great Depression in the 1930s lasted 10 years. Those Woody Allen movies we saw with people, throwing themselves from a balcony, that lasted 10 years. The financial recession that most of us lived through lasted 3 years.
That's 2008. Yes.
2008.
Yeah.
2008. What did it say? 2008.
Yeah, 2008.
Lasted 2-3 years. This time, this recession or depression will last much less than either of those. Why? because both of the two previous ones I just mentioned were caused by economic problems. On both occasions, the economy fell into a coma because of underlying structural factors. In 1929, there was a bubble in the stock market. Everybody had overbought stocks. So when panic, spread, everybody sold, and the economy collapsed for 10 years. In 2009, it was something that you know better than I. The mortgage, the fact that a lot of people took mortgages that shouldn't have. That caused a financial bubble in the real estate market, and that caused the crash, which lasted 2 years, 3 years. This time, it's different. It wasn't the patient didn't enter a coma because of underlying medical conditions. The patient entered into an induced coma. The economies were purposely shut down by governments in order to keep people from getting this virus. So the patient went into the operating room and was put into an induced coma. And when the patient is taken out of this induced coma, the patient is supposed to be in much better shape than he was in the two previous recessions.
All right, we're back. We hope you enjoyed that clip. I think it was about 3 minutes long. And Craig, he talks about the current state of affairs. Now, this was 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And really, some of the keynotes I got out of it, and I want you to really chime in here, was that we're in the worst recession ever, right? That he explains the differences between the Great Depression, 2008, and now. And so I would love your feedback on that piece.
Sure.
And a couple questions I'm going to throw out there are, do you think South Florida is going through the economic turmoil that maybe other parts of the country are going through? And I got to ask you, because you and I are on the street a lot, are we even in a recession?
Okay, you may have to let me.
We'll go back to that, but I want to
recap it. As far as whether we're in the worst depression or recession ever, that falls under the basket of perception versus reality.
Okay,
we're nowhere near the worst recession, let alone depression. He talked about 1929, the Great Depression, and he reminded everybody that was a 10-year depression from 1929 to 1939, and I kind of know that's true because my parents were born in the 20s. They're not here anymore, but God knows I heard all about what it was like growing up in the United States in the 30s when nobody had anything. It was a long, long recession / depression. The next serious one was 2008 and 2009. And he pointed out that was a solid 2 years where the unemployment lines were huge. Banks had no money. It was very difficult to project or forecast when things were going to be normal again. This one, what he was trying to explain to everybody, as awful as it was that we were quarantined and we were on lockdown and it felt like we were in a big depression, that this was a self-induced coma. Those were his very words.
That's right. He did say that.
And what he meant by that was this is going to be 6 months. And it was self-induced because we had to lock everything down in order to keep everybody from spreading the virus, or literally around the world. And obviously none of us have ever seen anything like this before. But when he called it a self-induced recession, that's what gave him the confidence to project to everybody, this is 6 months. The only caveat is if we see a second wave of this virus, which we can talk about a little bit later, because it's been 2 weeks since then, and
a lot has changed in the world, even in the last 2 weeks.
God, I'm amazed at how liberal people are when it comes to social distancing, as well as masks and so on, and what little evidence we see of any kind of a second wave. But let's hope that continues. So his point was this is a self-induced coma. This is a self-induced recession. This is going to cause some negative GDP, gross domestic product numbers, all over the world, including the United States, including South Florida. But when it comes out, whether you call it a V, which we've heard about, whether you call it a U, it's going to come out.
So you look at this, and you and I have talked a lot off camera about this. I think it's 2 weeks since this webinar.
Right.
I think it's bouncing back a lot quicker than anybody probably ever imagined.
Yes.
We both traveled. You're about to travel. Airports are busy. The restaurants. I called Houston's the other day. There was an hour wait at Houston's. it seems to be that people are just over it and ready to be back out there.
You know, we were doing some rehearsals before the webinar with Kieran Bowers, the president of Swire, as well as Andres Oppenheimer. You know, Andre said to me that he sees real estate in two categories. There's commercial and there's residential. He has said what I've experienced. I experienced it after September 11th, and I experienced it after 2008. When the Fed infuses the financial system with lots of cash,
Sure.
in this case, somewhere between $6 to $8 trillion, unprecedented. And then they also lower interest rates to add to the cash infusion. Residential real estate responds very quickly. And he said that when it comes to residential, off camera, that he expects that to be more like a V, commercial to be more like a U, because commercial, like hotels, for example, that very much depends on people feeling comfortable traveling again, whether it's business or tourism. I wish did I try to get him to say it on the webinar? Yes, but he's not a real estate guy.
Yeah.
So
and you know, it's interesting because you look at the mortgage applications, mortgage up every single week, they just get higher. And refinancing has gone down. New mortgage applications for purchases has gone up.
And you and I have discussed this a lot. The inventory of single-family homes in South Florida is dwindling, because whether it's for sale or for rent,
Gone.
and now condos have been open for what, a week, 10 days,
And they're already starting to
and
see
it's
the
starting to
activity.
shift now towards
right.
the condo side.
All right.
Welcome to the United States. We do respond kind of quickly.
We hand sanitize before.
You're right.
Kind of quickly, really
Hope we
quickly.
did. At least I did.
I did. It's right over there. All right, you ready for clip number 2?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's jump right into clip number 2. It's going to be Andres's expert projections on the recovery, and we'll be right back.
That virtually every credible economist I've talked to in recent weeks expect that this crisis will start reverting in the second half of this year or early next year at the most, and that the economy will start recovering late this year and will recover relatively rapidly next year.
And we're back. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that clip. This is new for us to bounce back and forth between clips. But some of what I got out of there, maybe you guys did too, that the economy is going to start reverting in the second half of this year, early next year, and the recovery is going to be, in line with that later this year to relatively rapidly next year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as I touched on a short while ago, you have a lot of cash in the world right now and super low interest rates. Let's just look today at what's happening on Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrials and Standard & Poor's S&P.
I would go look at my phone.
Sorry.
But we're filming with my phone.
No, but I can tell you what it is. I remember earlier this year, I have a son who's in the bond market in Wall Street.
Sure.
His name is Stephen, as you know. And Stephen told me back in January that the word on the street in Wall Street is that Wall Street was somewhere between 5 to 10%, a little overvalued.
Okay.
And its apogee, its height, was 29,000. Well, if it was 10% overvalued in January, so it needed a 10% haircut, that would bring it down to 26,000 and change, which is exactly where we are as you and I speak.
That's right.
No one saw that coming by June 3rd. S&P, no, you're at pre-corona levels with no anticipation of any haircut whatsoever. Today the market's up almost 450 points, and I know the market hasn't closed yet, but why is that? There's too much money in the system. There are very low interest rates, and a little known fact that isn't coming out. By next week, they're going to start talking about unemployment again, and unemployment numbers are now going down slowly, but they're going down. So, and that's all happening once again much faster than people could have imagined 2 weeks ago when we're all locked down and in quarantine. So I'm going back to what Andre said to me when we were off camera and rehearsing for our webinar. Plus, I've heard this from lots of other people that are a lot smarter than me when it comes to money. Residential is going to respond very quickly. Florida is unique because of its popularity. Remember last year, the official numbers were, I think Texas grew by like 1,100 people every single day. And the second fastest growing state was Florida. We
But
grew
by percentage-wise, Florida was the fastest.
Oh, no, without
by like 70% to like 30%.
Percentage-wise, we blow it away. Now, will that number hold on in 2020? There's no way it can. It's going to be lower because we were quarantined. Sure. Most of the people that move here are from the Northeast. Although we do expect some movement from South America, most people are from the Northeast. They were stuck for 3 months. They weren't able to get here. So that number will drop a little bit this year, but we're still going to be the second fastest growing state in the U.S. So you add the population growth with the low cost of money. And then finally, I do think it's becoming common knowledge now, or generally accepted, that inventory is getting scarce.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have an overhang. Look, you run RelatedISG, a general brokerage company. How many people always talk about the overhang of developer supply? That's old news now.
Not only on developer supply, but again, going back to single family homes, same thing. We had a call this morning, Coffee with Alex, with our agents. We had about 50 of our agents on, and one of their biggest concerns are the agents that work with buyers. I don't have anything to show them.
Please understand, for me, that's a lovely problem, because that means that the single family home buyer might now start considering condos, particularly as people are getting more comfortable with social distancing, as evidenced everywhere we go in Miami right now. So the combination of low inventory, continued population growth, and the low cost of money, mortgage financing, I think is a perfect recipe for a surprising rebound in residential housing.
Correct.
Probably.
See the common denominator? The common line there, rapid rebound.
Yeah, I do. Look what we're seeing on the streets of Miami. Correct. You just said you went to Houston's. Yeah. I was invited by my dear friend Kevin Maloney. He's the CEO of Property Markets Group, PMG. He's partners with Ryan Shear. They Echo Brickell, Echo Aventura, beautiful properties they've developed here in South Florida. And we had dinner at Timo's in Sunny Isles Beach. And I'm amazed at all the tables that were only half full, but that's all they're allowed to have full, and occupied anyway, and they were all full.
And you're waiting.
Yeah, and no, people weren't wearing masks except for the servers. It's just I find the recovery surprisingly fast, and I'm sure this is going to communicate to residential real estate.
Another fist bump? I hope so. All right, so we're going to go into clip number 3 now. And clip number 3 has to do with IMF's projections for our country and the global expansion and contraction. Contraction this year, expansion next year, growth next year. So before we even head into that, what does IMF stand for?
Oh, that's the International Monetary Fund.
Again, maybe a lot of you are probably learning it with me.
Now you know I'm a nerd.
So there you go. And as he's a nerd, we're going to go right into...
Yeah, perfect. That's a nice segue, isn't it?
I haven't seen this guy in a long time because we've been social distancing. Here we go into clip number 3. Enjoy.
They expect the global economy to contract by 3% this year and to grow by 5.8% next year. I repeat, this year the global economy will contract by 3% and will grow by 5.8% next year. That's what they expect. Now, breaking it down by country, by region, the US economy is expected to fall by 5.9% this year, almost 6%, a lot.
Yes.
And is expected to recover by about 4.7% next year. China's economy is expected to grow by only 1% this year, which by Chinese measures is pretty low. They used to grow by 10%. In most recent years, they were used to growing by 6%. This year, they're going to grow by 1%. But I was surprised to hear this figure because I found that amazing. But the IMF is projecting that China will grow by 9% next year.
Whoa.
And that's good news for Latin America for the reasons I'm going to say.
Not to interrupt you, that sounds like a nice U, no?
For China, it's almost a V.
Okay.
So, I mean, for China, it's going to be a pretty sharp recovery.
Okay.
Not so much for the U.S. Remember, the U.S. Down, what did it say, 5.9 this year, up by 4% next year. That's a U.
Okay.
Almost. Let's look at Latin America. The projections for Latin America. Mexico's economy will contract by 6.7% this year and to grow by 3% next year. Some independent economists I talked to say Mexico may fall even further by 8% this year. But the IMF is now projecting that the Mexican economy will grow by 3% next year. Brazil is expected to contract by 5.3% this year and to grow by 2.9% next year. Argentina is expected to contract by 5.7% this year and to grow by 4.4% next year.
We're back. Last question. Now, here's what we got from that clip, or here's what I got. That the global economy is going to fall by 3% this year. It's going to grow next year by 5.8%. Just to recap some numbers real quick, the U.S. is going to fall 5.9% this year, recover 4.6% next year. China is going to grow 9% next year. Latin America is going to go down by 6.5, go up by 3. Brazil is going to go down by 5.3, go up by 2.9. Argentina is going to go down by 5.7, and these are all percentages, and grow up by 4.4. Now, what's interesting in the conversation we had, Cameron, was because I was like, Craig, why am I even talking about China? Why am I even talking about Latin America? I can get, we're in Miami. This is Latin America. This is mini Latin America, right? We're a melting pot here. But you're like, no. I want to talk about China. Share with our audience.
Sure. Well, for two big reasons.
Okay.
One, let me just touch on Kieran Bowers, who's the president of Swire. He talked 2 weeks ago about how
I just realized I got to sit up. So if not, you're going to have to turn your back to the camera.
How the retail numbers in Beijing, Hong Kong, and Shanghai are 80% in the month of May what they were in May of last year. That is a surprising, wonderful good number that Swire had never forecasted once they got hit with Corona. And remember, they started shutting down sometime in January. Wow. So they never expected that kind of a rebound. So that, I think, is a portent of what we can expect here in the United States. They opened up at the end of April, and their May numbers were strong. So, what we think you and I are seeing as two real estate brokers in Miami, we're not the only ones. A lot of us, our colleagues, are sitting back and surprised at the traffic on the streets and the amount of energy in the air. There is a lot of pent-up energy and a lot of pent-up wanting. But let's go back to the other part of China. What Oppenheimer was also saying, not to get lost in all these percentages. Sure. So the GDP of China in 2020 now is going to be 1%. That's like negative numbers for China. But he said next year it's expected to be at 9% per the IMF. That's a big, healthy number. What does that mean to Latin America? Latin America, about 80% of everything they export, no matter what country you're referring to in all of Latin America, which includes South America and Central America like Mexico, is purchased by China. So if China's GDP is expected to be 9%, trust me, they're going to need some resources to keep that humming. So they're buying their stuff from South America again. That bodes very well for all these positive GDP numbers, good economic growth in South America next year. Wait 1 second. One of the things he also said was come this past January and February when China shut down, multinational companies in the United States that were purchasing goods from China to keep their businesses going, they had to find a new supply source. They went south of the border. They went to South America. And they've created new supply chains between certain countries and businesses in South America. Those relationships, some will go back to China, but some are going to stay intact. These are relationships that South America never had before, all brought to you by this Corona pandemic.
One of the positives.
So now South America has two sources of an economic boost, if you will. Multinational firms here in North America that are purchasing goods that they were previously only buying in China, and China, whose economy is clearly on the rebound, getting ready to suck up all of those exports from South America, which bodes well for a positive GDP, a very, very good economy for all of Latin America next year. What does that mean to Miami real estate? Well, you and I both know this is Plan B.
That's right.
For every Latin American family, owning property, not just in Miami, in all of South Florida. So when Latin American families start having money again, particularly fresh from the memory of this awful year and what they're currently experiencing, this is June 3rd, and countries like Brazil and Mexico,
they're going through it right now.
They're kind of where we were 2 months ago. Unfortunately, even in a worse spot. They're not going to forget this. So I think Plan B is going to be top of mind for most of those folks. That was Oppenheimer's point. If China has the recovery that the International Monetary Fund is forecasting, Latin America is going to do very well.
They're going to bring everything with it.
And they're going to come here and they're going to find, in my opinion, I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself in this discussion of ours, Alex, I think they're going to find very little inventory. Prices starting to inch up, fueled by the low cost of
Not only do
mortgage
the Latin Americans buy, but China's going to have an influx of new cash as well. And here we go, their love affair with Miami picks up again.
There's a lot of cash in the world right now. A lot of cash. You know, the United States practiced what they called quantitative easing, which basically means they were printing cash to put it into the system. And now it's actually having a nice effect on certain currencies in South America. The Mexican peso, the Colombian peso is steadily regaining strength against the dollar. They're almost back to pre-COVID levels.
So let's talk about that.
And that's important, particularly for Mexico.
Let's wrap it up on that note,
Sure,
because I know you
sure.
want to talk about currency. When I had Marcelo Kingston, a developer for 57 Ocean, on a couple weeks ago.
I saw it, yeah.
And the Brazilian real was like almost 6 to 1 at that point. I haven't checked this morning, so I have no idea what it's at. It's at 5. So it already
That's a
dropped.
huge drop.
It already
in 2
dropped
weeks?
20%.
In 2 weeks?
That's 20%.
It's huge.
Okay, so talk to me about let's wrap it up on currency, because obviously I know everybody's watching. That's great, they have more money, but if it's still 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 when the market was back in 2012, 13, it was like 1.5 to 1.
Well, you know,
what are you seeing there?
An overused expression is the new normal, but sometime last year, most Latin families were getting used to the new normal.
Right.
Their currencies.
You're so right. You guys were always talking about this is the new normal.
Yeah, we're using it now about COVID, but before this, it was really about currency. I think most Latin families are just hoping to get it back to January, February levels. That would be like the new normal. And I think you'll probably see that in Colombia probably in July. They're on lockdown still until the end of June. Mexico is the country I believe most people you're going to be seeing a lot of business from them starting now, because it's not just that the Mexican peso is gaining strength. They've lost tremendous confidence in their government over the way that they handled the coronavirus. Tremendous loss of confidence. And that government is already starting to send very strong signals about currency restrictions, capital restrictions. So it's very possible by the end of this year, Mexicans are going to have a hard time even getting their money out. That happens a lot, as you know, in Latin America. Most Americans that I talk to about this, they look at me like I got 3 heads. That never happens in the United States. I know it doesn't happen in the United States, but it does happen in Latin American countries a lot. And López Obrador has been very disappointing on lots of levels, particularly the way he dealt with Corona-19 in that country, the way he's still dealing with it. But now he's starting to telegraph that currency restrictions are being seriously considered. So you know what I think? I think once you give this another 2 or 3 weeks, when the Mexican peso is right back where it was, say, in February, and I think every real estate broker in South Florida is going to start seeing a lot of Mexicans. And come July, August, you're going to start seeing a lot of Colombians as well, but Mexicans first. That's an example of what happens as a result of all of all the dust settling.
And all our meetings that we've had regarding RelatedISG, you know, through the coronavirus and the rebound, I've been saying it, how many weeks now? July is going to be the best month in company history.
You have, yep, you have, and you're on your way.
Craig, thank you so much. I'm happy I made it through. I had 2 wisdom teeth removed yesterday, so I'm in a little bit of pain, but we made it through.
But it made you smarter.
I don't know if it made me, I kept my mouth shut. That's why it kept me smarter. Thank you guys for watching. Craig, how do they reach you if they want more information?
ISGworld.com, or they could just, my Instagram handle is Craig Studnicky. There's something that's unusual. Or, you know, we're filming today at Brickell City Center at the Penthouse at Rise. Come to Brickell City Center because you'll find me here probably 4 out of 5 work days a week, including
5 out of 5 days.
I'm here a lot.
All right,
so anyway, once again, thanks.
We're done. Thank you guys for joining us.
See you. Bye-bye.